Hi everyone, it's John from RFM Calc, and today, as part of our series taking a deep dive look into our core reports, we're talking about our average time between orders reports. So this has been a core part of the RFM Calc offering since we launched. If I just scroll down here to the account comparison, you can see the time before orders reports featured on all our plans, so right from our free plan all the way up to our huge plan. You can see just from this little summary that it will show you detailed information on the average time and value change as well between orders. For example, how long does it take a customer to place their second order after placing their first? So this, I think, out of all the reports, is probably one that our users find most useful. I mean, they're all useful, but I think in particular, this data is very difficult to get from other systems. So a lot of users come to us on the basis of this report. So I think the first question to ask is why is this important? I think in e-commerce there's a lot of misunderstanding really about when customers will return to place repeat orders. So you might have heard people say things like, oh, you've got to get them as soon as they place their first order, you've got to jump on them really, really quickly to place their second order or they won't come back. Or you might hear sweeping statements like, oh, if a customer doesn't place an order within 90 days of placing their first order, they'll never come back, they're lost forever. And this is absolute nonsense, and it's really just rooted in complete ignorance of understanding the data and not having the data in front of you to say, actually, this is when customers come back. And knowing that actually it may take for your business quite a few months for them to come back. It may for your business be a case that customers repeat year after year, and I'll demonstrate shortly in some different real life examples. But it may be a case that a customer could take 5 or 6 years between placing their first and their second order, and that's not uncommon. So it really varies by vertical and sector, and that's why I think it's very dangerous to make sweeping statements and say, oh, you have to do this, or if the customer doesn't come within 90 days for their second order, they're never coming back, because it's simply not true. And I think it's really rooted in ignorance, statements like that, and because the people making those statements just don't have visibility of the data and don't understand how to access this data. So that's why we include this in RFM Calc, and that's why it's such a core report for us in terms of the report suite that we provide. So, as always, the easiest way to demonstrate how the report works is just to look at a few real-life examples. So we've got a few demo reports set up here, taken from all different platforms. So we've got Magento, WooCommerce, Shopify, we've got a bespoke e-commerce platform as well. Just a reminder that RFM Calc is completely platform agnostic. We work with every e-commerce platform in existence. All you need to be able to do is export your order file and we'll do the rest. There's no API integrations, there's no modules, there's no tracking code to install. Just export your orders and we do everything else. So you can see on this site we've got what I call a long time period test. So it's a site with data running from August 2014 to October 2021 and around 17.5 million GBP turnover in that period. So if I go down to the time between orders section, straight away we're right into what you're probably looking for and what is the key data here, and that's the average time it takes customers on this site to place subsequent orders. So you can see here between the first and the second order, so obviously this only applies to customers who've placed a second order. We don't include any customer data in here for customers who've only placed the first order, because that wouldn't make sense, because obviously they're not coming back. So we've got the mean average time, you can see for this site, is a year and a month and 25 days, and the median average time, which is generally slightly better to look at when looking over a longer time period, because it helps remove those extreme numbers from the average, is 8 months and 25 days. And you can see that's pretty consistent between the second and third order as well. It's around 8 months. So what that's telling you is, first of all, forget everyone who's telling you if the customer's not coming back after 90 days, like 3 months, that they're gone, because obviously that's nonsense, because on average it's closer to 9 months before a customer comes back on this site to purchase again. And what's really interesting here as well is that we show the longest time gap. So for this particular site, the longest gap for any customer between a first and second order was 6 years, 4 months and 23 days. And you can actually hover over here and actually see, obviously the data is anonymized for the purposes of this report, which is an option when you generate a report with RFM Calc, but you've got your first order ID and second order ID there. So you can see this customer placed their first order in April 2015, and then they didn't come back for a second order until September 2021. So over, 6 years, nearly 6.5 year gap. And that's not untypical in e-commerce platforms, but it's so powerful to understand that data and understand actually when customers are coming back. Now, obviously, you can look at this in two ways. Firstly, yes, it's great to get this time down. So if you can get customers coming back quicker, that's great. But at the same time, if you want to maximize the performance of your retention campaigns, let's say, then having this data and knowing when the sweet spot is, when the best time on average is to target customers to come back for a second purchase, that's really, really powerful data. Really, really powerful data, because you can maximize that peak by targeting customers at the right time. And that is the key thing in e-commerce. So yes, absolutely, you want to bring this down. Of course, if you can get customers coming back sooner for that second order, that has a lot of benefits. But at the same time, if you know when they're coming back and you know the data, you've got to go with the flow of the river. If you know when customers are coming back for a second order on average, and and this is across, thousands of orders across 7 years, that sweet spot, that is the time that you can target customers for that second order, and that will maximize the returns you're getting from those retention campaigns. So it's so powerful to understand this data. So if you can scroll down, you can see we've got first to second, second to third. We'll go right down here, all the way down to, we'll actually go up to 100 orders. So on this site, the most frequent customer has placed 60 orders, which is obviously a lot, but we'll go up to 100 here in terms of this table. Obviously the data is still in there, but we, for the purposes of the report, we limit it to 100 rows, which I'll demonstrate on a different site shortly. We also do first to third and first to fifth, just as interesting metrics as well. So you can see how long it takes a customer on average to come back for a third order and a fifth order between the first and the fifth. Obviously, you can kind of add the times together here as well, but it just gives a nice snapshot to be able to give an extra view of that first to third, first to fifth order as well. Because quite often businesses, it's great to get that second order, but quite often you'll find in certain e-commerce brands that the third order is quite a focus as well in terms of getting that and making sure customers are coming back for that third order. So that's interesting data too. What that allows us then to generate is this really cool graph. So this is the average time between orders scatter chart. And this is a very, very typical shape. So I'll run through this on a few different sites, completely different verticals, completely different platforms. But what you can see is that you've got the days since previous order here, and then you have the blue dots are the mean average, and the orange dots are, or the yellow, I suppose, a median average. And what you can see is first to second order, second to third, the time always goes down, and this is really, really typical in e-commerce. You can see there's little fluctuations, and obviously when you get to kind of down here, the 55th and 56th orders and so on, it's not so clear cut. But generally, and we see this across a lot of e-commerce brands, once a customer's placed their second order, typically on average the time then to come back and place the third and fourth decreases each time, and that's really, really powerful data to know, and that just really emphasizes how loyalty works in e-commerce. Once a customer knows your brand, once they've come back and placed a repeat purchase, they're then much more likely to come back faster for that third order, that fourth order. And we see this across pretty much every vertical, every different e-commerce site that we look at for this, and that we see data generated for. This is a really, really common pattern to see that decreasing time. And again, if you didn't look at this data, you wouldn't know that. You'd have no idea how to know this. You couldn't see this in any e-commerce platform. You can't see this in Google Analytics. It's actually quite difficult data to get to in most scenarios, but in RFM Calc, obviously it's really easy, and we can generate that for you. So let's look at another site. So I call this the Magento high repeat test. So this is a much bigger site. So 47 million in turnover between October 2018 and May 2021. But you can see straight away, although there's nearly 250,000 orders, that's come from less than 4,000 customers. So there's a lot of repeat business here. The reason for that is this site is a B2B site. So really, really high lifetime revenue value. If you've seen the lifetime revenue video, you'll have seen the figures for this report as well. But if we go down to time between orders, you can see instantly the massive difference between the first kind of B2C site that we looked at and this site. So the average time between the first and second order on this site, the median, is just 19 days. So much shorter. So you definitely don't want to be waiting 8 months to retarget these customers, but you don't even want to be waiting 90 days, which some people might have just given you as a de facto option. You really want to be targeting them much sooner for that second purchase. But what's interesting is that if I go down to the chart here, And you can see, as I explained before, we limit this to the 100th order. But you can see here the most frequent customer for this site has placed 5,589 orders. So obviously very high repeat customer. But to prevent this being excessively long, we limit it to the first 100 data rows. But if we go down to the scatter chart, you can see, although obviously the times are much, much shorter, it's exactly the same pattern as we saw on the B2C site that I demonstrated previously. So the time between the first and second order, and then the second and third and fourth, it decreases each time, the mean and the median. It goes down. You might be wondering what the red and green dots are as well. So they are the longest time gaps. So that's this third column here, which is quite interesting to see. So you can hover over these and you can see, okay, the longest gap between the third and the fourth order for this particular site was 6 years, 1 month and 2 days. And you can see the order IDs there. So you can kind of reference that. You can cross-check that against your internal system. And then we do also include the shortest time gap, which is generally difficult to plot because very often it'll be short. You'll always have a customer who'll place, let's say, their second order on the same day as their first order, which is exactly what's happened here. So pretty much all of these are 0 days, but you can see which customer it was, when their second order was and third order. So let's say this customer, the shortest time between the third and fourth order was 0 days, but you can see the orders that were placed in February 2015, 2 orders on the same day there. So it allows you really to see that data in a visual format as well. But I think what's really interesting, completely different sites, completely different verticals, but that pattern of that reducing time. So the further along the order journey you go between the first and second, second and third and fourth and fifth, that time, that average time between the orders comes down. And that's incredibly powerful data to know, because what that means is, and this applies to pretty much every e-commerce site, you want to be treating that journey between the first and second order differently to the second and third, and differently again to the third and fourth. So you really want to be, in order to maximize your retention funnels and the work you're doing there, this data allows you to do that. It's really, really powerful data. So for completeness, let's have a look at another couple of reports for different sites as well. So we've got this WooCommerce test, fairly small site, less than $1 million turnover. But even for smaller sites, you can still get some really interesting data. So you can see the average time between orders here. And this one's slightly different, that you can see because there's a lot less data, there's a general downward trend, but it's not quite as pronounced. One thing I should mention as well, like all the tables in RFM Calc, you can sort here. So if you want to see the shortest gaps, longest gaps, you can filter easily, just click on a table heading. That's really, really easy on any of the data tables we provide. We then got this Shopify test. So if I go down to the time between orders here, you can see, again, this is very different to the first site. So this is a B2C site, but whereas on this B2C site, if I scroll up, we had kind of average time between the first and second order, the median being 8 months and 25 days. Here it's much, much shorter. It's 1 month and 20 days. So again, understanding your customer, understanding when they can come back. There is not a one-size-fits-all rule here. So it's so crucial to understand this data for your particular e-commerce site. But you can see this is much, much shorter, but you've still got those long gaps where between the first and second, the longest gap for this site was 4 years and 5 months. So, you don't want to give up on those customers. And that doesn't mean you should be retargeting those customers every day for 6 years or 5 years. But it's important not to kind of forget about them because they may well come back. And this happens, as you can see, I've demonstrated here across multiple e-commerce sites. Customers can wait several years before coming back for that second order. But if we scroll down to the chart here, you can see again, you've got this very similar trend where the mean and median time just drops over time based on the number of orders placed. So you can see the gap between the first and second in terms of mean is 5 months, and then it goes down to 5 months and 0 days for the second and third order, and then 4 months and 10 days for the third and fourth. So you can see that same constant e-commerce pattern and that kind of recognition and validation that the more orders a customer places, the more likely, not only the more likely as we've seen in previous videos they are to come back, but the faster they'll come back as well, which is incredibly powerful data to know. And then finally, we've got, just to show this works on really big sites as well. So we've got a bespoke system here from Bespoke Platform. So this is just shy of $145 million in revenue in this time period. But the data is still there. This data is still absolutely the same in terms of how you can look at it. So this particular site has a median average time of 4 months. So you remember we had one over here that was 8 months. We had one here, the Shopify one, that was kind of closer to 1 or 2 months. This one's 4 months. So again, it really varies depending on your sector and vertical. So understanding that is so powerful, and so many people don't understand this data. But again, if I scroll down to the scatter chart, you can see, and this is actually one of the neatest demonstrations. You've got that really clear kind of downwards trend in terms of the average time between orders, mean and median, based on the order count. So again, it goes down between first and second to third. Again, you can see every single e-commerce platform and different site that we've demonstrated today shows this pattern. It's really important to understand. But again, having that knowledge and that data, knowing exactly when customers will actually come back on average, is so powerful. It can make such a massive difference to your retention campaigns and when you're targeting customers. But then again, with this site, like all sites, you will always have these outliers who can take many years. So even when you get down here, so this customer between their 32nd and 32nd order, they took over 2 years to come back. So they placed 31 orders, and so you're probably thinking at that point, hey, this is a customer who's going to purchase regularly and probably buying pretty frequently, but for whatever reason, to place their 32nd order, it took them more than 2 years to come back. So by a lot of systems, by a lot of definitions, you listen to a lot of experts, that customer after their 31st order, is dead. They're not coming back. You'll never see them again. But actually they did. They came back, and you can dig into that more, obviously, in the customer CSV file and see actually how many orders they placed overall. But it's really important to understand that customers don't just forget about e-commerce sites automatically. If you give them a reason to come back in 3, 4, 5 years, there's still a chance they'll come back, and that's really important to remember. So the final part, just to touch on, is that we do also report on the average value between orders. So this isn't quite as insightful as the average time, which is obviously really powerful data, but it can be useful as well just to see how the AOV changes between people who place a first order and a second order, for example. So this data only includes relevant customers. So when we talk about first order AOV, it only includes orders from customers who went on to place a second order, not customers who only placed the first order then stopped. And that's the same going down the tree as well in terms of when you get to the second, this only includes customers who placed a third order, not those who stopped at the second. So it's not especially insightful. You can sometimes see some patterns here in terms of AOV increasing over time. For a lot of sites, this stays pretty static, regardless of which order number they're placing. You can obviously sort these columns as well to see where the highest AOV is in terms of the order number. If I look at the high repeat section here, so you can actually see between the second and first order, the AOV actually goes down, and there's a genuine, general negative trend here in terms of the AOV going down. But then it kind of goes up over time as well. So we include this just for completeness. Really, it's not obviously as insightful as the average time between orders, which is really actionable, which can make a massive difference to your retention campaigns. But you can sometimes, for certain sites, see patterns here where customers do spend more on subsequent orders as well. And equally, you might think customers are spending more when they come back, but have no way to prove that. And this can actually disprove that, which is helpful as well. So I think there's sometimes an assumption that, yes, if a customer places a second order, they're absolutely more likely to come back and place a third. We can see that the time it takes them to come back and place those orders on average will reduce as well. So I think there's sometimes a temptation to think, oh, they must be spending more as well when they come back for that second and third and fourth order. They're spending more on average as well, but typically they're not. In some cases they are. So that's why it's kind of useful to have this data to either prove or disprove that hypothesis, depending on how you look at it. So this is something that was requested, and obviously we include. But like I say, I think for most e-commerce sites, it's certainly not as powerful as the time data, but it's still useful to see. Fantastic. So hopefully that's been useful. That basically covers everything in the average time and value between orders section. Hopefully that's explained why we include this report, why the data is so powerful, why the data is so important when you're targeting repeat customers. Honestly, our users have told us this has made such a massive difference to their retention campaigns, because before they could see this data, they were just blindly firing out emails. Oh, second purchase 90 days, 60 days, 30 days. They had no idea when customers were actually coming back for that repeat purchase and when the sweet spot was. So it's really powerful data. Hopefully that's clear. Yeah, but thank you. Thank you for watching the video. We really appreciate it. Obviously, if you've got any questions about RFM Calc, feel free to visit the website, rfmcalc.com. Just drop us a line there. Always happy to answer any questions. But if not, thanks for watching and look forward to hopefully seeing you on the next video. Thanks, everyone.